Hello everyone, this is Susanne Knabe-Nicol from Police Science Doctor, and today I'm coming to you with the third installment in the summary series of the Society of Evidence-Based Policing 2020 conference talks. Let me just share my screen here. So the talk today that I'm going to summarize is by Professor Tom Kirchmaier. He works at the London School of Economics and he's the Director of Policing and Crime there at the Centre for Economic Performance. He and colleagues carried out some research on gangs, drugs and knife crime in London. So 2 years ago, as well as still today, this is a very current issue. So what he was talking about here was that they found that after decades of falling crime, serious violence started rising again in England and Wales, and that's actually the solid black line is homicide, and the others you might not be able to see. But the graph is starting from 1990 onwards. It was found that actually knives and other sharp instruments are the weapon of choice for about 40% of all these murders. And most of these incidents are male-on-male crimes. The black line is males, the dotted line is females. And you may recall from Nick Morgan's talk, that was the second in this series, so the preceding talk that I summarized for you, he was looking in great detail at who the victims were. In the 70s, males and females were roughly equally victimized when it comes to homicide. But since then, because most of it is now gang and crime related, or gang and drug related, the main victims of homicide are actually young males, the same demographic that are also perpetrating the homicide. And you can see in this graph here that the rate of male murder victims is much higher than that of female murder victims. So unsurprisingly, we find that most knife crime takes place in London, and followed by the Northwest. So this is still England and Wales. So Northwest would include places like Liverpool and Manchester. And we see here that there has been a sharp increase in knife crime since 2014, 2016 especially. But actually, just prior to lockdown starting in March 2020 here, knife crime in London seemed to have stabilized on a new plateau. And also knife crime with injury had actually fallen to 2013 levels, which was a bit of a success story for the London Metropolitan Police. Knife crime with injury is actually violent incidents rather than knife crime overall, which also includes police-initiated crimes such as finding, seizing knives. So on this side, we see that there was, again, somewhat of a plateau when it comes to murders in London. We've got a line through there because the actual figures seem to be all over the place. But if you draw a line, a sort of an average through it, you can see that it was relatively stable. The victims are mainly male and young, and that is, they carry knives because there's a false belief that they're going to be safer when they have a knife, but that actually causes knives to be around and used. Gangs are often the only role model for young children in certain areas. They think that it might be easy money to get involved in the drugs trade and the gangs business, and knife crime and gang activity are highly correlated, and that's something we'll get to later as well. And changes in economic conditions and drug market dynamics may affect the use of higher violence, and Tom is actually going to talk about that a bit more as well. Now, in the 2010s, we've obviously had a decade of austerity. Youth services were cut dramatically, and that might be a cause why there's been such an increase in gang violence and gang activity and gang joining. Now, because of the lockdowns, Tom was telling us that Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, that supply drugs, the purity has grown significantly because of the supply routes being dried up through COVID. So the stock has been piling up in these producer countries. So when all of that stopped or stops and everything goes back to normal, what will that mean? Will there be an influx of really high purity drugs into the normal markets again? What will that cause? Will it cause a lot of overdoses, more crime rates, more competition between gangs? So when it comes to drug markets and technology, there has been a change, and the top black line there is the UK, and that's the number of people who have been obtaining the drugs online. Rather than going to the street corner and meeting a drug dealer there, they order the drugs online and they get delivered through the letterbox in their front door. And the UK users are doing that much more than, for example, than other countries. I mean, if you can see that red dotted line, that's America. The online orders have actually dropped there. So users who bought the drugs online, the UK online market share doubled, and the drug markets for the market for drugs in London street was actually dramatically changed. So gangs fight for their access to users, and they need to find new markets, and that's maybe something that drove county lines. County lines being the phenomenon of large gangs being located in large cities, actually getting their drug runners to leave those cities and deliver drugs to coastal towns, market towns, and into much smaller places, and everything is spreading out. When it comes to those drug sales, the UK is actually responsible for almost half of these originating orders. That's the blue part of the circle. The green part of the circle is Germany. So there's a massive online market for drugs in the UK. And it's become a lot easier to obtain drugs within 24 hours if you order online. Now, the price for drugs has changed quite a bit. So that orange line is UK prices. The black line is American prices. They are converging. So drugs in the UK have become a lot cheaper. And so it's now safe and cheap. So safe because you don't have to go and meet a drug dealer. You can order it online, and it's become cheaper to order drugs and to get hold of them in the UK. It's remained pretty stable in the US. Then Tom was talking about this map. So from 1995 onwards, this shows that gangs were pushed out of central London areas through gentrification and spread outwards towards, northwest, south, and east areas within London. Also, in 1889, there was somebody who walked the streets of London and mapped and categorized streets and looked at what kind of economical level they were on. And those streets that were classed as being very low income and deprived, Tom is saying here that if he overlaid that map from back then with the current map of where gang activity is taking place, they would overlap. So these places have not changed. Rich places are still rich from 100 years ago. Poor places are still poor. And that's over 100 years later. Survival of the fittest. So the larger group monopolize larger areas, and they're also ones then who develop these county lines. And this happens a lot. So gang activity is much higher in areas with more deprivation, more lone parent families, with higher percentage of a black population and higher unemployment rates. And these areas also have high levels of knife crime, even when you look at other factors that are held constant across the areas that have been compared. And this research actually found a causal factor. So when a new gang sort of came onto the scene, that caused an increase in knife crime. It's not just a correlation, there's a causal factor here. So gang presence actually causes crime rates, which is probably not very surprising. They also found in a survey with drug users, with young people, that young black males' perception and fears about problems with drugs and knives in the area they live in were very accurate predictors of where knife crimes and knife murders were going to take place within the next 12 months. So youngsters in London actually know where the problems are. Now, the conclusions that Tom was drawing here were that gangs form in areas with higher levels of deprivation, higher percentages of lone parents, and higher levels of social housing. If you think about this, you can check which areas have these aspects, and you can do something about that. You can put more support in, you can change what is going on around there. So this is possibly quite preventable. Poverty is persistent. So, we talked about that map from over 100 years ago, still being reflective now, predictive of where we're going to have problems. Again, we can look it up, something that can be changed perhaps. Gangs have a positive effect on knife crime. What he's saying here is that the more gangs, the more knife crime. So, they bring knife crime with them, they cause it. And they were estimating that an additional gang moving into an area actually increases the crime rate by between 15 and 35%. So the issue is multifaceted, and the current rising trend is likely the result of changes in technology. We were talking about drugs now being ordered online. So that was just some of the bits of the talk with Professor Tom Kirchmaier, or Professor. I don't need to say the professor in German as well. I hope that you found this interesting. It's obviously what some of us didn't know was that the online market for drugs delivery, and I have no idea which sites they use. I'm pretty sure it's not Amazon. Perhaps it is Amazon, disguised as something else. But drugs are being ordered online much more now, especially in the UK. So the London street gangs and other street gangs had to come up with many different ways of maintaining their business, and they came up with the county lines supply market, and competition has gone up massively. And also don't forget, this presentation was given, this research was published just at in the first few months of lockdown. What has changed since then? So I hope that this was something that you're interested in. If so, please go to the SEBP website, and the link is there. Watch the whole talk by Tom Kirchmaier himself. And if you've got any questions, Google him and drop in an email. And I will see you in the next summary video. Bye-bye.